So what is the best way to set up and sell vertical spreads in the Thinkorswim platform? In this video, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know so you can be as effective as possible. Hey, how's it going? On this channel, you will learn the steps it takes to make a full-time income trading in the stock market. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. And today, we're talking about selling vertical spreads. So this is a daily chart of Apple. And for starters, let's just say we want to sell a call credit spread. And so that means we're going to want to short the stock. And so a quick idea here is when you're looking at spreads is how much you want to do your risk to reward. So a good rule of thumb is generally the closer to at the money your spread is, the more money you take, but also the more risk you have. And so that's generally how trading works. The more risk you take, the more chance for potential profit you have, but also the more risk you have. So if you decided that, hey, I want to do kind of a one-to-one risk, let's say $100 to make $100, that would generally be selling something like at the 204 call and then maybe buying the 208 call as protection up here. And that would generally give you about a 1-to-1 ratio of win to loss, but it would also give you about a 50-50 chance to win or lose. Pretty much how spreads are always priced is based on probabilities. And so if you have a 1-to-1 win-lose ratio in terms of profit or loss, that usually means statistically you have a 50% chance of winning and a 50% chance of losing. Now, if you wanted to have a higher chance of winning, you would need to sell a further out of the money call. And so that would be a call that would be about 206, which would be higher than the current trading price. And then you could buy the 210s as protection. And that would give you a risk to reward ratio that would give you a higher chance of winning, because if you just think about it, the stock has to go much higher here to even get close to your calls. And so it gives you more wiggle room for the stock to come up and then actually eventually go down, potentially in your favor. But on the flip side of that too is generally for this kind of trade, you would be risking $100 to make $50. So because you're risking more to make less, it increases the chances that you're going to be right, because you kind of have to get paid off for taking that extra risk. So you're gonna win more often than not. So maybe that would be you win 65% of the time, 66% of the time, and you lose 30% of the time. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of sites and teaching places out there that say that, our spreads and our trades win 95% of the time. Well, that's just because they set their spreads up like this. They set them up to where they get paid very little, but their risk is a lot. And so, yes, they do win 95% of the time, but they win very little money. And then that 5% of the time they do lose, they actually lose a lot of money. And so taking the high probability trades isn't always the best idea, because you are getting paid less and you're risking more. Sometimes taking that 50-50, if the idea is that you have a trading strategy in mind and that is in your favor, those are the better trades to take. Now, if we want to quickly look at how setting up a trade would look like, let's go into the Analyze tab and actually see what these profit losses can look like. So I'm just going to go into, here's the options chain of Apple, and I'm going to look at, let's say, the June 19th, and that's going to be 15 days till expiration. So that's pretty short in terms of duration of your options, but it's not super short as well. Now, because we're going to be selling call spread and the stock is actually currently trading at around 204.5, if we want to sell the at the monies, that is going to be about this 205 strike price here. And another way to see which is going to be the closest, you could just see over here which delta is closest to 50, because 50 delta is essentially right at the money, and this one is 48 right here. So I'm going to right click and go sell vertical, and then that's going to bring up, let me just exit out of that there, that's going to bring up this trade right here. And so this is our vertical. We're selling the 205 call, which is going to be the more expensive one, because that's how vertical works. You sell the more expensive one and buy a cheaper one as protection, because you're not wanting to sell a naked call with unlimited risk on it. And so at default, it's going to give us the closest strike price call to buy as protection. And generally you want to make it a little bit larger just to kind of give yourself a little bit more money to take in initially. Now, this is going to default at 10. I'm just going to change that to 1 to make it kind of easy math. And then I'm going to take this 207 and put it to 210, which is going to make our spread $5 wide, which means that the total control that we have essentially is going to be $500. And so that's how much risk we have on the trade. But to calculate how much we are actually risking, we need to take into account also how much money we are selling this for. And so just to make the math easier, we could try to sell this at $2. And so that means we would be taking in or selling this spread for $200 initially. And so that would then make our risk, if you take that 500 we had, that we have a risk, and minus the 200, that then takes our risk actually to $300. So then our trade would be risking $300 to make $200. And so if we quickly go to risk profile here on the analyze tab, right here you can see that our max profit here based on this orange pinkish line is going to be 200, and then our max loss down here is going to be about 300 as well. And so that's generally a really quick, easy way to calculate it, or you can come into this analyze tab here and do it that way yourself as well. Now, if we go to the actual trade tab, we can quickly recreate that here, because I did do that in the analyze tab, so it doesn't really switch over. You do have to go to the actual trade tab and do it. So we're just going to do sell vertical, and then it's going to bring up this sell sign again, and then we need to trade this to 1, change this to 210, and then this is actually, it's going to try and fill us at 190, which is what the current price of the market. You can see down here the mid price is 190, and then the natural is 186. Generally, you want to try and get filled at the mid price, but if you do want to get filled in right away, you can hit the natural price, which is essentially hitting market order. Now, we want to just quickly check over our trade. We're getting filled on how many contracts we want. You never want to over trade. You always want to try and stay in your means. And then we're selling the 205, buying the 210 as protection. We can click confirm and send, and it will tell us here our break even price. So even though we're selling the 205, the stock can go pretty much all the way up to 207, and we can still break even. Now, this does mean at expiration, so that's not necessarily what we care about, because quite often you want to use an option spread and not trade it all the way into expiration. It's a lot better to try and sell it, get a quick profit, and then get out. We will talk about that in a few minutes. Now, here our max profit is 190. Just like how much we're selling it for down here. So your max profit is always going to be how much you're selling it for. And then 500 minus 190 does make 310 for our max loss. And then it's just going to tell us our commissions and a few other effects on buying power. Now we can just send this, and then it will go in the system and it will try and get filled. Now the market actually isn't open right now, so we won't see this get filled. But generally you do want to give it a couple minutes to try and get filled, because sometimes spreads can take a little longer than just buying a straight up call or a straight up put. But if you do have trouble getting filled and you want to change your order, you can right click here. Right here we have the sell order. You can right click this and do cancel replace, and that'll bring up that exact same thing again. And you could try and go down here and hit natural, or change your price here to whatever you want to do to try and get filled. And then you would confirm and send and resend that in, and that'll just quickly adjust that order for you. Now, one thing I like to do with spreads is, as soon as they get filled, is actually set up a closing order to take profits, just so you don't have to think about it. And another thing is why I don't like holding spreads until expiration, unless that is part of your strategy, but I wouldn't suggest it right away, is because if we go back to this analyze tab, you can see this purple line here actually shows the actual profit right now if it was at that current trading price. And so you can see here, as the stock goes down, the spread starts collecting money, and it goes up pretty quickly initially, and then as you get farther and farther into your profit zone and the stock goes farther and farther down, it tapers off to how quickly you make money. So for every dollar the stock moves down, you actually start making less and less. And so you can see here, once you get about 80% or 70% of what your max profit would be on this trade, the stock needs a lot of movement for you to make all that money. So if you tried to go for 100% of max profit, the stock would have to move a huge amount, almost double from here to here. It would have to move double for you to make that extra $30 right here. And so that is generally why I suggest that you set up an order to maybe close it at 50% or around 60 or 70%, but I wouldn't suggest going much over 70 or 80% as your goal for max profit, just because, again, it tapers off really quickly. And once you get up to this price of, let's say 180, and your trade is up $180, now you're still in the trade, and so you have the potential to make that 20 extra dollars, or you have the potential to lose $180, and then on top of that, the $300 you have risk initially. And so your trade essentially goes into risking $480 to make $20, and that is just crazy. And so that is why you want to close it out instead of waiting to get out that extra money, just because if you think about it as taking on a new trade, you wouldn't ever do that kind of trade to risk that much money to make that little. It just doesn't make sense. So even though you have that trade on and it's already up money and it looks great, I would always suggest taking it off, because that's how spreads are. You risk a certain amount to make a certain amount. They're not like calls to where, oh, the stock's going great, I can just keep holding on. Now, if we go back to the trade tab to set that up quickly, now I do have a different position that's open, so we're just going to go to that as an example. Now, to create that closing order, you're just going to go to this little POS sign, this position sign up here, and then you can also go into your monitor tab and do it there. You can see down here, if we go to Apple and this right here, you could select these two and then right click and create closing order and buy vertical back. Or in the trade tab up here, you can also just right click here and do create closing order and buy vertical back as well. And then that's going to bring up a close order tab. Quickly, what we want to do is we want to just say, let's say we want to buy this for about 50 cents back. Let's just say that's our 60% of max profit or 70% of max profit of what we want. And then we're going to want to change this to good till cancel, or GTC. And that is going to essentially make it so that this order doesn't expire at the end of the day. And so it'll keep on going until our trade is filled. And then all we have to do is click confirm and send. We can see that that gets shown there, buy and sell reversal of these, but it'll only fill once the actual stock hits that current area. And we can actually go to the chart here and see that limit order right here. Now, because this does show you a stock price of where the order will get filled, I wouldn't say that this is exactly where the order will get filled, because options are very dynamic in how they are priced. So this, just because this limit order says it's at 198.75 cents, that doesn't mean that if the stock goes all the way down there, it will get filled. It could be, maybe it'll get filled at 200, or maybe it'll take all the way to 196 to get filled. So just use this as a general rough estimate, but don't use this as concrete of this is where it's going to get filled, so I can plan my trade on that. And another thing I like to do with every trade as well is have an exit strategy. So with every trade you do, you want to have a plan on when you're going to take profits and a plan on when you're going to get out of the trade when it's going against you. And so for this trade right here, we could say that, oh, we want to give the stock, let's say like 2 points of leeway before we actually want to get out of this trade. And so what we can do there is you can actually set up 2 different sell orders at the same time for options. That is one thing that's really nice about just straight up selling stock, is you could have a profit order in place and a stop loss order in place, but you can't do that with options. And so the way I found that works pretty well is having a order to take profits for my verticals or for trades, and then having an alert here that then will trigger to send a phone text message or just do an alert on the platform and that will tell me like, okay, I need to get out of this trade. The stock has got to where I want. So we just go to where we want to set this up. So let's say we want to give the stock about 2 points. So we want to go to 206 and about 41, and then we just right click and do create alert. And then we want to know if the stock is at or above the current price, and that price is here. So you can actually change that price as well if you didn't right click exactly where you wanted. And then down here it's going to notify with a sound on the platform and a mobile, and then we can just create and send that order in, or that alert in, and then that's going to show right there. So if the stock goes down here, we're going to get filled and make profit, and then if the stock goes up here, we are going to want to close out on that trade. Now I would highly suggest doing this for every trade you do, having an exit plan for when to take profits and when to take losses for every trade you do, because you don't get smarter when you're in a trade. You only get emotional, and that can always cause you to just take on more losses than you want, or get greedy and lose out on the profits you already had. So to quickly then walk you through selling a put vertical spread to go long, let's quickly look at, let's look at a different stock, and let's say Microsoft. So let's say Microsoft, we think is going to go up here. We want to sell a put credit spread. Now let's do a different scenario than the last one and actually sell one for less money and have higher risk, but it'll give us a higher profit chance, just to give us a different scenario. So for this, we can say we want to, instead of selling kind of the at the money, we could sell about, down here, and then buy the kind of the 204 as protection. And so that'll give us still decent amount of income with that spread, but it will also increase our chance of having a winning trade. So if we go into just quickly into the analyze tab to try and see how we want to set this up. So if we're at the put side over here, the at the money will be the about 137, and I think we said we wanted to sell the 136. So we'll right click on this, sell vertical, and then that'll come up down here. We want to change this to selling one of these. And then we want to actually increase our width as well, because it's only 1 point wide. So actually with spreads, if you do want to risk just $100 on the trade, if you have a really small account, you could set this up to where you would be taking in $34, and you would be have that $100 risk. So 100 minus 34 would be 66. And we can actually look at the risk profile here and see that you would be risking $66 and getting $34 on your profit side. So that would be kind of risking 2 to make 1, but also statistically your chance of winning would be 2 and for 1 loss. And so if we wanted to actually set this trade up, we would go into the actual trade tab and do, sell vertical, and then set this up. It's pretty much already set up. 34 day, confirm and send. Our puts are at the right price. We're kind of getting what we want at the mid price. Now you can see here why you always want to try and fill at the mid price is if for this trade, because you can see that the natural and the mid price are $6 difference. That is a huge percentage of our actual trade. If we're only taking in $35, $34, and we sold this for $28, that reduces the amount of profit we can make by a large percentage. Now it's not that big money wise. So maybe if you're selling ones like this at this small, you're more for practice, and that's totally fine. But in the long run, when you're doing trades that, let's say this is, you sell this for $340, you just do 10 of these, and then you instead sell this for $280, that is another huge difference. So I suggest always try and be selling at the mid price, just because that is a lot of money difference when it adds up, especially over long term or a lot of trades. And so we then click confirm and send, and our max profit, and it gives our break even price, and then we send that in. And then again, if we wanted to create that closing order, I again already have another position here, but we would then create closing order by right clicking on this and then do buy vertical, and then it would then have that closing order for us. And then again, I would suggest setting up that alert system as well, because that is really a good way to trade. You want to be methodical about your trading, because otherwise it is easy to make silly mistakes or let your emotions run you down when you're either up a lot of money or down a lot of money. And you maybe think the trade's going to come back. You just need to get out of a bad trade and just move on to the next one. Hey, so thanks for checking out this video. I will have a video out on buying vertical spreads, so definitely check that out. And if you just like this content in general, make sure to subscribe if you want more. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below.